I want to welcome everyone to this time of interview with Dr. Medzini and his son, Mickey. They are very much filled with the information that I think we all need to hear and want to hear of what is progressing in Israel now that we are 27 days into this war. And so I welcome you. And Dr. Medzini, I welcome you. And Mickey, it's so good to have you with us also. I'm looking forward to hearing from you some of the things that are going on just in the community and the help that's being given by so many Israelis during this time who are not necessarily on the front lines of the battle, but certainly they're on the front lines of winning the war. So welcome to both of you. And Dr. Medzini, would you like to begin?
Let's start off. Since we have spoken last, Israel finds itself now actually engaged in some fighting in one way or another. 5 fronts, believe it or not. Very active fighting in Gaza, where the IDF probably is very close to the center of Gaza. And I'll add more about that in a minute. The northern front has become very active. And about 3-4 hours ago, quite a lot of shelling. And one building was hit in Kiryat Shmona. And that doesn't look good. And people are waiting for a speech by the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah. He's supposed to make a speech tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And people wonder what he's going to say, if they'll join, and to what extent. And they still remember the devastation we caused them in the last war in Lebanon. It was in 2006. The third front is Syria, where we have been involved in attacking supply depots, which the Iranians used to deliver equipment to Hezbollah. And Hezbollah attempted, apparently unknown to us, to deliver some of these weapons by sea to Gaza until the recent outbreak. The fourth front is the West Bank, where things are beginning to warm up a bit, partly because since the beginning of this war, about 120,000 Palestinians who are used to working in Israel every day with permits and are a very important factor in our construction industry, they have not come. And as a result of that, the housing construction is close to a standstill, and that creates a major problem. Furthermore, there are disputes within our government whether Israel should hand over money that we have been collecting on their behalf. Because those who are opposed to it say that they will hand it over to Hamas. Others say that if you do not hand over, then you're going to have a serious economic crisis in the West Bank, and that could inflame the entire region. The fifth front is south, 1,700 kilometers away from home, and that is Yemen, where a number of missiles and apparently drones were flown, were fired by the Houthis, who are proxies of Iran in Yemen. These are the people who, I think a year and a half ago, fired missiles at the Saudi Arabia oil installations and caused a suspension, I think, of about 50% of the production of oil in Saudi Arabia. Where they have the capability, they have the weapons, they have the money, and this is opening up a totally new front line. Diplomatically, we have not fared well because international, let's say a number of countries are beginning to be very upset over what they consider to be a humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Just to remind people who are with us, the Gaza Strip has a population estimated 2.3 million. We have asked, begged, pleaded with about 1 million Palestinians who live in the northern part of the Gaza Strip to get themselves south, because we have decided to enter that part of Gaza and try and take out the Hamas command headquarters, various storage ammunition depots that are underground. In the last 2 days, Israel attacked 2 such command posts in a refugee camp called Jabalia in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And if you saw the film clips, the ground just sunk, which means that under the ground there were tunnels, and the road just collapsed into these tunnels. In one of them, we killed a man who was responsible for quite a few of the attacks against Israel. This obviously has created a great deal of concern, interest, I would say some people would say sympathy for the poor Palestinians, especially children. As usual, the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip claimed initially 400 dead. Then they reconsidered, and suddenly the number dropped down to about 50. It is true that there is a growing number of casualties who are civilians because either they don't want to leave or Hamas prevents them from leaving, going south, which is a safer zone. And this is one of the reasons why you have this. We have another problem that we have to face, and that is the proportionality game. We are accused of being disproportional. And I asked somebody who phoned me the other day, how many Americans were killed in Pearl Harbor? Well, he said about 2,430. And then I asked him how many Japanese were killed in Tokyo on the firebombing. 120,000 in Hiroshima, about 80,000 in Nagasaki, 70,000, altogether 270,000, proportion 1 to 100. In other words, the number games doesn't work. But people like to, when I say this on CNN, I say this on other networks, it's disproportionate. I have no idea what is the meaning of disproportionate. This is something that we have to handle. On the more positive side, it seems that we are moving ahead in Gaza. And the aim essentially is to cut the strip and to reach 2 specific targets. One of them is a university called Al-Azhar, under which there are tunnels and command posts and the usual stuff. And the other is a huge hospital called Shifa, which we already shown, especially in foreign ambassadors, foreign correspondents. We have shown them the tunnels that exist under the Shifa hospital. And obviously it is virtually impossible to hit a hospital without raising the entire world against you. So I feel the purpose is to surround it. And then slowly to move into these 2 places in order to show exactly what these tunnels are. And we come back, therefore, to the key problem. We are a regular army, IDF. We try to fight according to the rules to the laws of war. Hamas is a terrorist organization that is not committed and not bound in any way by any rule. And this is something that people seem to forget. People seem to forget something else. This is a war. This is no longer a raid. This is no longer another round.
Mm-hmm.
A major war that started by Israel being attacked, losing 1,400 people on Israeli territory. And Hamas occupied Israeli territory for more than a day, something that hasn't happened since 1948. And therefore, that hit us badly, hurt us badly. And as a result of this, if to a certain extent Israel went to war from a position of total disarray, disunity, enormous social tension, enormous political tension, this war has done one very important thing. It unified Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that before. You can see this specifically in the extent of voluntary work done by many Israelis, but the tasks are daunting. We never had, for example, we had to evacuate about 60,000 Israelis from the northern border area. And they are scattered around the country in hotels and B&B and hostels and so on. Somebody has to look after them. We've taken out, we have evacuated thousands, tens of thousands of Israelis who lived along the Gaza border. Some of them because their communities were totally destroyed in the attack on the 7th of October. Some of them because they're being shelled by rockets to this very day. Now, these people are not working. These people are crowded, one family, into one big hotel room or small hotel room. And this costs a great deal of money, but there is enormous psychological tension.
Mm-hmm.
How long is it going to last? And above all, who's going to pay for it? Those who were engaged in farming, they're asking a very simple question. Who is going to milk our cows? Who is going to collect the eggs? Who is going to sow the fields? In other words, this is predominantly an agricultural area.
Right.
Israel receives a great deal of its milk from the Gaza border area, and there are no shortages, but somebody has to pay attention to this. The last thing I would say at this point is the government has been very slow in coming to terms with a new reality. Civil servants usually are a bit sluggish and slow and bureaucratic, and you have to fill up forms of all sorts. To some extent, many Israelis got fed up. They say, look, if the government can't deliver, we will deliver. And therefore, you have more and more Israelis engaged in voluntary work, ranging from food, ranging from volunteering to pick up tomatoes, pick up cucumbers, do agriculture, farming work. And now, increasingly, we're going to do more and more Zooms. One other good news is that as of this morning, schools have reopened in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we assume there will be fewer rockets fired in our direction, although a rocket fell recently, not long ago, several hours ago, near Tel Aviv. So I would say the outlook, not exactly rosy, but we being optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
We think that we have to do it. We are convinced that we have to take out Hamas. We can't have a situation whereby every 2-3 years there's another round and more casualties and more tension. once and for all. We've got to take them out. So far, we are supported by the United States, by Britain, by France, by Germany. We are opposed by China, by Russia, by Iran, of course, Arab world. Jordan has called its ambassador back. They forget that the king's father slaughtered thousands of Palestinians in September 1970 because they wanted to topple him. So they know exactly what is the meaning of Hamas. So I would say there's a beginning of some light, hope, but it's still, as we are told by Prime Minister of Defense, long way to go.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to see if you could address is this idea of the refugee camp there in Gaza. Now, I've been to Israel on many occasions, and that terminology, I think, is very confusing to people, especially in America. When you say refugees, I mean, I've seen areas that are called refugee camps that are, filled with condos that are very expensive looking, freestanding homes. These are not what you conjure up in your mind when you hear the term refugee or refugee camp. And I think especially in this situation, if you could explain a little bit about the refugee camp there in Gaza, maybe when it started, why it's there and still considered a refugee camp. I think it would help clear up, at least in American mentality, when they're seeing some of this stuff on the news, what's really involved with this.
Speaking of refugees, the other day I forget on which channel, I think one of the British channels, Pakistan, a Muslim country, decided to kick out 2 million Afghanis who have been living in Pakistan illegally for the last, 40, 50 years. And nobody says anything. Why? Because Muslims kick out other Muslims. No news. When Israel is involved, the entire world rises. Refugees, we've got to go back to 47.
Mm-hmm.
United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181, partition of Palestine recommended. The British mandate ends. 2 states would be created in its place, a Jewish state and an Arab state. And internationalized Jerusalem. The British said, we are out. The Jews said, we will take whatever we are given, including in internationalized Jerusalem. The Arabs said, we are totally opposed and we're going to go to war, which they did. And therefore, war ensued. Israel was invaded by the armed forces of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Iraq. There were Iraqi forces about 14 miles from Tel Aviv at some point. And during a war, you have refugees. I still have very good memories. Beginning of 1948, wealthy Palestinian Arabs living in Jerusalem, getting into their Buicks and Chryslers and Plymouths and decamping and going away, hoping that at some point the Arab armies will destroy the Jewish state and they will be able to come back to Palestine. In fact, some of them probably still have keys. The big flight began around April 1948, and the massive flight began in July 1948. I would say the cause for the refugee problem, a war situation causes refugees wherever it is. In many places, they themselves decided would rather go and look for life elsewhere. In some cases, they were told by their leaders, get out, clear the way for the Arab armies. You'll come back when we win the war. In some places, we expelled, especially after our experience with the massacre of Jews in the old city of Jerusalem, which we lost, Rosh Hashanah, that we lost 35 people who were killed in the early part of the war. The UN numbers are about 730,000 Palestinians, meaning those who live in the country in Palestine as defined British mandate. Where'd they go? Some went to the West Bank, and they became, around 1950, citizens of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the only country that gave them citizenship. Others went north to Lebanon, and therefore you have a number of camps put up by the UN in Sidon, and two very famous camps in Beirut, Sabra and Shatila. Very few went to Egypt, very few went to Syria. A number ended up in what is today Jordan. The majority of people living in Jordan today are of Palestinian descent. Who looked after them? United Nations, under an organization called UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Organization, created in 1949. And they are supposed to distribute food, medical services, and above all, education to those who registered as refugees. The key problem is that you now have fifth-generation refugees, because nobody dies, because if you die, you lose your card, and therefore you lose your rations. And as a result, you've got a fifth generation, and this is self-perpetuating situation. Many of them built tents, huts, and later on more substantial housing in Gaza Strip. For example, there's a camp called Jabalia, a camp called Shati. I think we're not far from there. It's on the seashore. A camp called Moazi, a number of refugee camps, as there are refugee camps in Jenin, near Ramallah, near Nablus, and near Bethlehem, a place called the Heisha, which is about 15 miles from where I'm talking to you. And they are being sustained by the UN. The UN is being funded predominantly by the Western powers. The Arab states refused to participate, saying, we didn't create this problem, therefore we don't have to pay for them. Every year there's a huge argument, how long is this thing going to last? There is a High Commissioner of Refugees of the UN. His mandate extends around the world with the exception of Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And the general idea is to perpetuate this problem, keep it alive. And this comes under the heading of the right of return. Once a year, the UN General Assembly votes about 16 to 20 anti-Israel resolutions, including one called the right of return. So here in brief is the issue. What happened in Jabalia, Hamas obviously uses United Nations facilities, such as food stores, schools, hospitals, distribution centers, to build tunnels under them, to shelter under them, and to command operations against Israel. They're no longer denying it. And the UN is also stopped denying this. My feeling is that if at one point the UN will say enough is enough, or will tell them, look, 3 to 5 years and this is over, they will somehow adjust to it. and begin to realize that they are no longer supported by the UN. But in the world, refugee denotes something.
Mhm.
It rings a bell. It tugs at your heartstrings. Poor people, they're refugees from where? When did they become refugees? 75 years ago. I will add one more thing. Wars result in refugees. At the end of Second World War, Czechoslovakia kicked out, I think, about 5 million Germans from Sudetenland. Poland kicked out probably 10 or 15 million Germans. Without asking any question, nobody bothered at the time. In other words, you have refugee problems to this very day. A month ago, in Armenia, in a place called Nagorno-Karabakh, 110,000 Armenians became refugees. Did anyone hear about this? Did anyone care about this? The answer is no, because it involves Russia. The war in Ukraine resulted in millions of refugees. Happily for many of these refugees, Poland took them in. Others took them in. We took quite a few of the Jews who wanted, and also non-Jews.
Right.
A few non-Jews who wanted to come here. So this is a normal thing, but none of this has lasted for about 3 generations. This is unacceptable. And at some point, if there will ever be some sort of a settlement, this refugee business will come to an end.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mickey,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could give us some idea of what you're experiencing and witnessing there on the ground with all of the country coming together to help one another.
So my father mentioned a bit of it. It's still ongoing. Still me going on Shabbat and my friends today still doing a lot of agriculture volunteering. By the way, throughout the country, it's not just in the Gaza Strip. We lost a lot of people who worked in agriculture. There are many people who are called up to the army and cannot hold their farming. So the older guys, my generations, are going and supporting and doing the work. It's good. It's helping. I must say, we are not professionals. So it takes us what 5 of us are doing. Probably one professional guy is doing in the same day, but it keeps the spirit of the country coming together very high. Another type of volunteering that is still very much happening is supporting the communities. I'm personally in touch and helping fundraising some money for one of the kibbutzim that was brutally attacked. There are the few issues there. One is they are still separated in different hotels. There are one community that used to live together is dispersed with different places. While some of their families and friends are being held as hostages, overcoming the trauma. There is a lot of help and volunteering there in that regard. Where the understanding in the last week, we see more and more understanding that the government will have to come eventually with a programs for all those issues. Bringing them together, giving them an ongoing counseling and support, overcoming or handling and learning to live with what they underwent. So this is still happening. Another thing that we start to see is that people are starting to go back and understand that the economy has to continue and work. And if on the first week there were no coffee shop, there was no shopping, nothing was open, nothing was happening. Law offices were closed, counting offices were closed. People realized that we have to start. It's going to be long, and we have to start to go back to those who can to generate to live as normal life as you can within war condition. And even if you go and we went with my father, we were father lives in Jerusalem. We had to go to Tel Aviv for something. You're going into a coffee shop, you don't feel comfortable, but on the other hand, you see the owner and you understand if we will not sit there, he will not have anything to provide to his family. So this is the atmosphere. Life is starting to go back. I had to speak with my accountant today, and things that 2 weeks ago no one thought about that. Leave it for later. Now is beginning of later.
Yeah.
Now we now we start to understand it's going to be long. We have to do both, continue support, continue volunteer, and try to go back as much as we can to normal life, those who can.
Mhm.
So we're starting to see the beginning of it. It's a change.
So, Mickey, are you aware of any organizations that are maybe asking or helping? It seems like in America, we have a lot of farmers. We have a lot of people that potentially would be able to come and volunteer during this time to assist in some of the areas that are really needed, because, as you're saying, many of the people that are called up are the ones who were the farmers and were the bus drivers and were the people, driving trucks and delivering goods and all of these things. Is there any type of a movement or organization that is looking to bring in people who from other countries would want to provide their services?
So as I said, I go myself and I work with organization that is very much involved until now with Israelis. What I can do is speak with them and see how we can work with the people coming from abroad. Main issue is to find a way how to host them and where to host them.
Yeah.
Into account that
Gary,
some of those
Gary,
places are being had by the people who left the communities.
Yes.
But I will check it.
we've asked for volunteers among doctors. Because quite a few doctors were called up for military service. And we've had huge number of injured people on October 7th. And every day, look, we've lost by now, since the advance into Gaza started, I think we've lost about 20 soldiers. And quite a few are wounded. And therefore, hospitals are beginning to show signs of lack of doctors. If you bring a huge number of people, then you've got to house them and look after them. I would, however, urge anyone who wants to volunteer, the best thing to do is to contact the nearest Israeli consulate.
Okay.
There is one in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in Miami, in New York, and in Boston, or the Israel Embassy in Washington. They will have the list of organizations that are handling people who volunteer. I want to add one more thing that my son mentioned. We have been used to quickie wars.
Mm.
1956 was 100 hours, 67, 6 days. Even the Yom Kippur War, 18 days of fighting. We are now already on day 27. and therefore this is quite serious. I want to add one more thing about the length. There is a great deal of talk about humanitarian pause, humanitarian ceasefire, that sort of thing. The curious thing is that I see the other day, President Biden was confronted by somebody who shouted in Minnesota. I think he went on a fundraiser, who shouted ceasefire. Ceasefire, as far as we're concerned, for 1 or 2 hours is possible in order to allow people to leave the Gaza Strip, foreign national, seriously wounded. But a long ceasefire means that Hamas has the opportunity to regroup and rearm and reorganize and sort itself out and continue the attack against Israel. So we are not very keen, and the Prime Minister said so openly. Long ceasefire for us is not in the cards. There is one more element that I think you should be aware of, and that is a number of people here are already beginning to think what will happen in the day after. This war is not going to last forever. At some point, we will have to start thinking what's going to happen in the Gaza Strip. Will it go? Will it remain independent? Will we occupy it and be responsible? Will maybe Egypt wants it? Maybe there'll be an international courts. Maybe there'll be return to Palestinian Authority. We have no idea. There are all sorts of ideas are floating around. Who will look after the Gaza Strip? The Arab countries said immediately, none of our bloody interest, of our interest, we could care less. You break your teeth on what's going to happen in Gaza, but there are 2 billion people. Somebody has to look after them. Now, this is the only decent thing to do, but bear in mind that we are already beginning to pay a lot of attention to what is going to happen the day after. But we are determined no more temporary ceasefires, pauses. Basically, what happened on October 7th was a violation of a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire with them, I think, last year. And they, of course, violated it because they couldn't care less. So the news today, day 27, in certain areas, it looks beginning to look positive. In other areas, we're in for a very long haul, and we will require, it's not only sustained prayers, moral support, political support, financial aid. We will require, I think, above all, understanding. What is at stake here? Because we feel we're not acting only on our own behalf.
Right.
See what happened when ISIS took over. And see what happened when the Americans and others had to take over Mosul. It took 9 months and tens of thousands of casualties. But that was considered Iraq as an Arab country. Who cares? The moment Israel is involved, the treatment is totally different. But as you are aware, I'm an optimist, a born optimist. Otherwise, I don't know what I would do. And therefore, I would like to infect you, and through you, all those who listen to us, there is the beginning of some sort of a sliver of light on the horizon.
Good. Well, we will try to take that and infect others with your positive attitude and with all of this information. I know I have no end to questions, but I think this has probably been long enough. I really appreciate being able to do this with you, and I will continue to try to get the word out that you're available, because I would like to see other people, whether they be churches or other organizations, take advantage of your amazing insight and knowledge. And I appreciate both of you spending your time with me, and we will promote people to listen to this. And I hope it helps change what we're facing in the media war.
I did not yet mention another point, which I will not elaborate on. We're now engaged in a totally new front, and that is anti-Semitism worldwide. And we are very much concerned about what is happening in your own country,
Yes.
with huge number of anti-Semitic incidents. Let's leave this for another discussion, but this is something that concerns many, many of us.
That's a very huge concern. I did want to bring it up, but as you say, I think if we table it for another discussion, that would be better. Okay, well, thank you both again for your time. Shabbat Shalom. Know that our prayers, our hearts are with you, and we'll be believing that this fundraising campaign that we're launching, hopefully by tomorrow, will be very successful in bringing much needed financial aid to the organizations that are doing so much in Israel to assist with all that you're facing. God bless you both, bless your families, and we hope to talk to you again very soon.
Very good. With pleasure, Gary. All the best.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.